Matt Corral, what you see from him day one when you got here versus where he's at right now?
Well, first I found a very eager young man that wanted to have the opportunity to prove himself, learn the system from the day I got hired to call him on the phone to today. He's worked really, really hard. He's been all in and been pleased with his progress. There's obviously always going to be days where he's learning a new system and we got to do a lot of corrections, but he's got a lot of talent, and more importantly, he's got, I think, a big desire to prove himself, and I hope he keeps that.
Rich. Right here.
Oh, you got the mic. It's scared me, like somebody from beyond.
I know you like to go fast, and most guys in the RPO game do, but what dictates to you when you want to slow it down, or do you?
Well, obviously part of our philosophy, and this is I'll talking with Coach Luke as well, mine has always been you want to be able to control the tempo as best you can, and then if you have a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter, you try to try to win the game. And so that's always kind of been my thought process was let's try to get a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter, and then at that time. But controlling or dictating the tempo is not just going fast all the time. It's changing tempos up throughout the course of the game. But you have to practice going fast. I think it's always harder to slow down than it is to speed up. And so from day one, we've tried to be able to go fast at times. And Memphis will be used to that because they've done it, and Coach Norvell's seen it for a long, long time. But for us, it hasn't been something totally new because I think they've done some of that in the past. But for us, we've worked hard on different tempos since spring practice.
Has there been an element of the offense as you've installed it that has been particularly challenging for these guys that they've had to work harder to grasp?
I think anytime you're a new system, the terminology is going to be different. I always tell everybody, it's checkers, not chess. You don't have to think 6 moves ahead, maybe just one. But at the same time, there's always different terminology, different ways that you run route packages, different ways you attack a defense. And for us, it's been, some maybe systems kind of approach it from a pass first standpoint, some from a run first. I think we try to look at it from a totality standpoint that, we want to take what the defense gives us, but you have to be able to run the football, I think, at times, and how you run it. That doesn't mean you're going to always be 2 backs and 2 tight ends. If you can run the ball from a spread set, sometimes that gives you a little bit of an edge or an advantage. So, we've tried to install it from day one. I've been really pleased from a schematic standpoint. What we've been able to get in, particularly for the first year, has been pretty pleasing. Now, executing it is another thing. You got to be able to execute it. So that's going to be the big thing for us, particularly when you have younger players. You have to not forget about the fundamental part of it. And I think sometimes as a coach, it looks good for us, but our young guys still have to have the fundamental teaching done as well. So we've had to teach fundamentals, which we always will do, and a scheme. And that's made the challenge pretty. I think it's been a challenge, but it's been pretty fun too because our guys have bought into it.
You bring up some of those young guys, for guys making their first start on Saturday, what do you say to kind of mentally get them ready, get them prepared, or do you think they are there at this point?
Yeah, I think it goes back to how you practice. I think if you practice a certain way and a certain level, I always tell the players they will default to their level of practice. And so the game should be easier for them than when practice is. And that's always a goal for us in our practices, make the practices more difficult than what they'll see in the games. And that way, when the games happen, they don't have to think as much. They're not, the speed of the game, all that kind of stuff doesn't overwhelm them. So we've tried to do that in practice. You never really know until you play a game. But they have guys who respond, particularly our freshmen, our young guys. And again, there's a lot of them on offense. They've responded pretty well to the pressure we put on in practice. And again, the game, there's going to be a little more anxiety. It's obviously a game, but I've been pleased with what I've seen so far.
Coach, you kind of answered that question just a minute ago, or just then. When we visited before the season, we talked about a quarterback room with all freshmen and then a lot of freshmen on offense. From then until now, how is everything and how is everybody towards game week with that room full of freshmen, specifically the quarterback?
Well, they've grown up in about 4 weeks, so they're 4 weeks older. And I've told them from day one that I cannot afford to coach them like a freshman. From that standpoint, as far as, okay, you're gonna be redshirted, stay in the shadows, learn what you can, and be ready in a year. We can't do that. We have to get them ready to play right now. So I've had to teach them or coach them as if they were second, third, or fourth year players. And all those guys, I've been really impressed with their intelligence from a football standpoint and from a maturity from an off the field standpoint. And we knew a little bit of that from recruiting them. But there's also, you never really know until you start getting into the nuts and bolts of practice and throwing schemes out and different coverages. And sometimes I have to take a step back and realize these guys are just 18, 19 years old, true freshmen. And but again, I've got to coach them as if they're veteran players, or at least been around a bit, because they've got to respond that way. And they've really reacted really well to that.
In your experience with first-time starting quarterbacks, especially really young guys, has there been a difference in what's possible playbook-wise, first quarter to third quarter? How much do you have to kind of read his mental and emotional state to know what you can even try
Ask
to
me
do?
this Saturday afternoon, maybe I can tell you a better answer. I do think, again, just the way we go about doing it, and if it's the first year in the system, they're almost all freshmen. I think the difference is if you had a junior class-wise type of quarterback, he'd have a lot of his fundamentals down, a certain maturity and all that. But, when you're a new system, it's new for everybody. And having done this, 4 or 5 different places, always the first year is the most difficult. Particularly as coaches, we got to make sure we don't do too much, because we can think too much and try to overwhelm mentally. So we've taken steps back. Our guys again have done as much mentally as I could have hoped at this point. And as we go forward throughout the season and certainly throughout the next couple of years, we'll be able to do more and more with them. And that's the exciting part.
At the top, you mentioned Matt's passion. Do you ask him to lean into that on the field, or do you kind of want him to control himself?
Well, I've always said I'd rather say whoa than sick 'em, and I got to say whoa with Matt. I think quite a bit, but not from the standpoint. His passion, as long as it's an intentional, positive type of passion. You don't want to do anything silly and get out of your game, get out of your mental focus and concentration. And Matt's able to do that. I mean, he's not going to rein him in, but I don't see that being a problem. I like his leadership, and again, he's just a redshirt freshman. But I've told him from day one, I mean, you've got to be prepared to be the face of the program as a redshirt freshman. And that's a lot to put on a guy, but I think he'll be able to handle it, and we'll coach him to do that.
Coach, you coached a bunch of good college quarterbacks through the years. At this stage in his development, who is Matt Corral most like that you coached previously?
I've been asked that. That's a good question. I've been asked, I've had different types of guys. I mean, I've had some really athletic guys that can run and throw, but he probably closest skill set wise resembles a guy named Matt Scott, who I had my first year at Arizona, I think in 2012, and Matt Scott was from California as well. But very quick release, great arm strength, was a good runner, and a feisty competitor type, and probably matches his skill set more than anybody. And Matt Scott had a phenomenal. He only had him 1 year because he was a redshirt senior, but he threw for 4,000 yards and did a great job. Had I had him for a second year, I think he might have been the player of the year in the league. But Matt Corral is probably very similar to him as far as their skill set goes. But they're all been different. And again, Matt, putting pressure on him to do a certain amount for our offense maybe seemed like a lot, but I think any quarterback in any system wants that. And Matt will be prepared for that mentally. And we've got some young guys behind him that have done a good job as well.
Coach, how would you rate the physicality of the offense, particularly the offensive line? I know Matt wanted to get tougher and more physical up front.
Yeah, I mean, the question comes on Saturday, right? I think in practice they've responded pretty well. They're still getting, young guys still are getting stronger, but the guys in practice have done a good job with it. I think sometimes when guys aren't as physical as we want, it's because they're still thinking. and they're processing, and that's part of our job as coaches, so they don't do that, and we gotta make sure that's not the case on Saturday. I don't wanna overload them on Saturday. I don't want anything where our players have to overthink and not play as physical, as fast as they need to.